In this episode of Love Leadership, we are going to be talking about the importance of character in leadership. Welcome back to episode 3 of Love Leadership. We exist to build up leaders who love to lead and lead to love. I'm your host, Mike O'Connell, joined by Todd Doxzon.
What's
Come
up?
on, man. Episode 3,
Come
here
on,
we are.
let's go.
And we're on this amazing journey, a 5-part series. Then it was an 8-part series, 12-part.
Could be 12, you never know.
Could be 15, folks.
Hey, we're just trying to help some folks, man. That's our goal.
That's really the goal, yeah.
Motivated, genuinely loving God, loving people, really wanting to help people. That's why we're here, man.
That's it. And so really, we're going through this 5-part series. We call it the 5C's of leadership.
Yep.
We know that, man, leadership's difficult, and we want to grow personally in our personal leadership, but we also want to grow as an organization. And oftentimes as leaders, control and fear are what hold us back from delegating, from empowering, and that's ultimately going to lead to burnout. So you might be watching today and you're like, I'm there. Maybe you're watching, you're saying, I'm on my way there. And so that's what we're doing, is we're talking about what is our lens for bringing leaders onto our team to help us continue to execute the visions that God has given us. So can you just briefly just cover the framework for what really has sparked this? You know, we've been talking about this story in Exodus.
Exodus 18, man, and it was Moses. He's, leading a ton of people. His father-in-law, Jethro, gives him the best word of advice ever because, remember, Moses is literally sitting in his office from morning till evening, and burning himself out, neglecting his family, the whole thing. And Jethro says, bro, let me give you a little piece of advice. And it's funny, though, as like an in-law, just imagine your father-in-law just coming in, observing your house, kind of how you're running it, and being like, yo, bro, can I tell you something? And Moses was humble enough, though, to receive his advice. And he said, you're going to burn yourself out. You're going to burn the people out if you don't do something about this. And he said, hey, select capable people and then empower them to lead. And that's really what it is. And Moses, by God's grace, took that advice. He implemented it, and he delegated leaders of 1,000, 150, 10, and they were off and running after that. And so that's the lens that we're trying to look at from our organization, but also trying to help others and say, hey man, this is a key part of it. And as you're building your team, that's what the 5C's is all about. Selecting leaders with these type of qualities. Yeah, and so if you didn't listen to episode 1, we talked about the first C, which was being called, right? I mean, that's where it starts. The second episode was this idea of being consistent, right? Trying to find, leaders that are consistent, that will continually show up. This third one is crucial. Today we're going to talk about this idea called character. Character, man, it's so big. And I think, we've been talking about our athletic backgrounds, but talent just isn't good enough. Right. I mean, we've been around a lot of talented people that were actually a cancer to our teams because they lack the character. That's right. That would actually elevate the team goals over their own agendas. And today we're talking about character. There's been a key verse for us when it comes to these 5C's, and it's found in 2 Timothy. Can you just talk about that and where we see this idea of character in that? 2 Timothy 2:2, the things you've heard from me among many witnesses, commit these to faithful men. And that's what we're going to talk about today, who will be able to teach others also. But the key is Paul was investing in Timothy, a man of character. He was a faithful man. He was a guy that he could trust. And I think that's a big thing, Mike, when we're talking about character, is you got to be able to trust the person that you're empowering to lead. If you don't trust them, they're going to do the right thing when no one else is looking. I think that you got a wrong leader in your organization. That's so good. And so this is a monumental piece as we're prayerfully considering raising up and delegating and empowering people, which, by the way, you got to empower. You can't just put in a position and then handcuff them. Yeah. You got to give them the ability to make decisions. Yeah, I think that's where we find out if they're even a person of character. That's right. Because in our control and our lack of extending that trust right off the bat, we don't really ever get to see their true colors, right? And so as leaders, if we'll lean in and say, you know what, I'm going to trust you until you break the trust, until you reveal that you're not the person of character. That's what I tell my kids all the time. I have 17-year-old twin boys, and I tell them, I was like, man, I'm going to treat you like a man until you prove me different. I'm going to trust you. that you're going to say, you're going to do what you're saying you're going to do until you break that trust. And by God's grace, our boys have been great. I've been able to treat them like men because they're men of character and they're, I can trust them.
Totally.
But when something shifts, that's a little bit different.
Yeah. And so there's another cool area in Scripture that I just want to touch on real quick that I think is this particular story. It crosses over not just, vocational full-time ministry, but this story can impact marketplace leaders. True. It can impact coaches.
Yep.
And we're talking about a guy in the Bible named Daniel, right? And if you could just talk about his story a little bit and how we see his character come through in really a unfortunate and difficult circumstance.
Well, if you look at the story of Daniel, it's pretty powerful. The Babylonians came in, they took over God's chosen people, the Israelites. And what they did is they selected, King Nebuchadnezzar, who was the king of Babylon, was a smart leader because what he did, he selected smart, good-looking, capable young men to serve in his court. So Daniel was one of them. So, imagine being Daniel, you're taken from Jerusalem, from your hometown, taken all the way to Babylon, and now they put him in this kind of like Babylon University. It was like preparation. It was like prep school to serve in the king's court. And one of the things that they would do, they would teach them the literature, the language, but they would give them a diet of the king's diet. Well, being a good Jewish boy, you wouldn't eat kosher food that wasn't kosher.
That's it, yeah.
Well, this meat was sacrificed to other gods. They give him wine. And Daniel could have just said, well, when in Vegas, when in Rome, do it, what is the Vegas thing? But my whole point is he could have just went along with it. But he had a deep conviction. He had deep character, and he said, no, I'm not going to partake of the king's delicacies. And I think it's in Daniel 1, verse 8. He makes the choice, and he says, I'm not going to compromise. And that's pretty big. You could have been in the king's, well, he's in the king's court, but he made a choice regardless of the outcome of it. He had a deep conviction that he was going to do what he knew deep in his heart was the right thing. And that's the kind of guy you can trust, Mike.
That's it. And I think, as you see his life unfold, right? It's crazy how much ground we see in his life, even just throughout the book of Daniel. But I think it's interesting because I think some people, they assume that they need to compromise in order to elevate to the positions, the power, the success that maybe they desire or long to achieve in their life.
Yep.
But what's interesting is time and time again, Daniel refuses to compromise. And then we see a man at 85 when you get into chapter 6, and he's still being elevated.
Yeah.
He's still being elevated. A new king is obviously in charge at this time, but he's being elevated to one of the highest positions of leadership. And so I just think that we buy into the lie when we believe that we have to sell out on good character in order to become all that God really would have us to become.
It's funny you say that because in this world, you're right. If you want the whole get rich quick or you want to get something done quick, you might get there, but the price you pay in the long run. And I've heard it said something about if your influence grows far, quicker than your character does, you outgrow, right, your character, and all of a sudden that thing topples down. But if you're consistent, it's funny because you think of consistency and character combining.
They're connected.
Whew, big time. And I love looking at, I like observing solid leaders, and I'm telling you, the guys that I really look up to are those guys. They're men of character. No, they're not perfect, there's no perfect man, but they have a standard by which they operate. And, those are the type of guys that I'd follow into the front lines, men of character.
100%. And so speaking of character, let's kind of talk a little practically and personally.
Okay.
Because, character, I think one of the ways that character is built, shaped, etc., is through difficult seasons of life. It could be circumstances, things that don't go the way you want them to. Can you tell us about a time in your life where you experienced that and you look back on that now and you say, in hindsight, I can see that God was shaping my character through that?
I tell you, it's like a muscle. You gotta beat it all up and rip it for it to grow, and that really is a picture of our character. And God really took me through a lot of painful experiences, Mike. And I'm talking physically.
Yeah.
I had every injury in the book. Every single one of those injuries was an opportunity to grow. in my character, in being steadfast and being immovable, a lot of those different things. One in particular, though, I can think about, it was actually 2004. I was down in Carolina playing in the Arena League, and we had a coaching change after week 10. And my quarterback, Matt Nagy, he's the head coach of the Bears right now. He was the Q. I was like one of the starting receivers. And we were balling, man. We were like both of us in the top 5, I think, in the league. And balling, I mean, it's the AFL, but in any event.
Hey, let's go.
We're still having fun.
Yeah.
But it was crazy because in that season, we had a coaching change, and the defensive coordinator took over the head job. And the very first move he made was benching Nagy and I. And so he brought us into his office, and he said, hey, man, we're going to go with Foggy at quarterback. And I think it was Damian Green, or not, I forget his name. But in any event, younger guy. And honestly, he probably was more athletic than me. He was probably a better player. And he's like, all right, I'm going to make this move. And so I went. In that day, if you were the main receiver, you were called the offensive specialist, the OS. Yeah. And coach said, well, we're just going to move you. You're still going to hold for field goals, but that's the only time you're going to get on the field, man. So it was comedy. I mean,
still the offensive specialist.
So humbling. I went from the OS to the HS. That was the joke on the team. Holding Todd, specialist. You're now the holding specialist. And so I'd hop over that little like wall, and I'd just trot back, into hold for field goals. And that was all I did.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, it might have been one of the best seasons of character growth for me, because I just felt like it was a next level in my humility and am I a team guy? And I think that's part of character is, what are you in this for?
That's so good.
Can you keep moving forward when things are out of your control? It's a circumstance that's tough for you. Do you just give up? Do you whine? Do you pout? Do you go, well, I'm just going to move on? Or do you go, you know what? For whatever reason, this is the position I'm in right now. It's a sovereign work of God. I'm going to maximize this time. And, man, I'm telling you, God gave me a grace in that season to just invest in this younger guy. As much as he wanted to be coached, totally. I was giving him some stuff that I had learned throughout the last, 3 seasons or whatever, 3-4 seasons. And it was really a pretty pivotal time of my life when it comes to character.
It's interesting that it's moments like this that either break you or they end up elevating you.
It's
you know what I mean? Because
it was a test for sure.
It was a test for sure. And the question is, are we willing to hang in there and continue to allow God to strengthen us, to build our character in the midst of those seasons?
I gotta tell you, so, and I don't tell this rest of the story a whole lot, but it's funny because so I get benched week 10. Week 16, the last regular season game, we're on the road at Georgia. And the receiver, I think he must have been drinking the night before or something. I forget what happened, but he was real groggy. And the new starting quarterback benched him right in the middle of he looked at me, he's like, get off the field. Doxzon tried to jump in. It was like third down. He's like, all right, go deep, and ended up scoring a couple of touchdowns. And it's funny because that next season, who called in the offseason? Georgia. The Georgia Force called. I got down there because of, I didn't whine, I didn't complain, I just controlled what I could, and by God's grace grew in character. But God blessed that. He blessed that. It was a pivotal moment of testing, and then He gave me this other opportunity in this other team. And, created more relationships, got to meet other people, got to grow even more. I got cut the next year in week 10 from them, and they brought in another guy, and they sent me packing. But it's like, how are you going to respond in those situations, I think, are character building opportunities.
Totally. And I would say, there's a quote that I like to say: the atmosphere you permit decides the product you produce. You're becoming like the 5 people you hang around. We need some people in our corner that are going to be honest with us when we go through seasons of struggle. I mean, it could be a physical issue, an injury, a demotion, bankruptcy, a divorce. There's all sorts of circumstances in life that can, cause us to spiral downward.
Golly,
but if we have the right people in our corner, I think oftentimes that's what is the catalyst for our response. I'll tell you just a quick story from my life. I remember being at Iowa State, and when I went to Iowa State, I came in 2006 under Dan McCarney. I'm there my redshirt year. Dan McCarney gets fired. Gene Chizik comes in. Gene Chizik comes in. He's there for 2 seasons. And I led her those 2 seasons under Gene Chizik. The coaching staff's about to put me on scholarship, and then Gene takes the job in Auburn. So here I am, getting ready to go into my junior season at Iowa State, and I'm about to, meet my 3rd head coach. And so I sit down with my head coach and have this meeting. He says, "Hey man, if you take care of business during spring ball, we'll take care of you." Well, I come out in spring practice, man. I'm fitting the wrong gaps. So I end up that spring being 3rd on the depth chart at my position. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I just love the game too much, man. I want to play. I'm sick of the politics. And my character was never someone that would quit. It was my character was more of being a person of resolve. But in a moment of weakness, when circumstances aligned with emotions that were a little out of alignment, I needed somebody that would call me on the carpet. And so that person was Curtis Taylor. KT, man. He looked me dead in the eyes. I told him, I'm done. I'm going to transfer. I'm done with this. He said, "Are you going to give up? I mean, look how far God has brought you in your time here at Iowa State. Are you ready to give up on all that he wants to do in your life?" And it's like, that's all I needed to hear. Golly, and all of a sudden, I look at that moment, and it's a character building moment, because 4 months later, as we started fall camp, I was awarded a scholarship and won the starting job at safety. I would have missed out on that.
Missed out.
You know what I mean? And so I look back on these moments, and we need people in our life that are gonna walk with us through difficult circumstances, so that we can get to the places that God really wants us to.
Look what you have missed. You know what I'm saying?
If you wouldn't
to take that advantage of moving the right direction in that time.
Exactly. And so, I kind of want to switch courses here and have you put on your leadership hat, your organizational leader hat. How do we speak to the leaders out there they're in this situation? They identify that there's a super talented person in their organization, but they recognize that time and time again, they have character flaws. And ultimately, they're in this predicament, like, what do I do? Because their character is starting to become a cancer to the team, but their personal performance is really a big part of the organization.
It's a really tough question, Mike, and it's funny because the pastor heart is you just want to walk with someone the entire time, and we do. I mean, the fact is, you're never too far from God's love. He's going to continue to pursue you, but at the same time, from that's the spiritual side. From the practical side, there has to be a point of negative returns. So what we've done personally is we've just come to people and said, "Hey, here's what we observe. We want to help you as much as you want to be helped. Here are a couple of things that we need to see change. We're going to give you 2 weeks, a month, 2 months, whatever it is. So you have clarity around the correction, but now you give them the opportunity. And now we come around and we try to provide as much support and much help as we can. But it's been my observation, our free will that God's given us is like our best gift, but it's almost our worst curse. Because some folks, man, like, you make that clear, you try to provide support, but for whatever reason, they still shoot themselves in the foot, and they still, can't get past some of these deep character issues. And so it's really heart-wrenching, if I'm really honest with you at times, that when you deal with that, because you want to just be with them, you want to help them grow, but sometimes you got to cut bait. And now, it doesn't mean that you don't love them. It doesn't mean that you don't, even outside of the organization, try to do all you can to still be a blessing and try to help them. But you're running an organization, man. I mean, and if you're not careful, that cancer can completely hinder the movement and the, what I'm saying? Like the unity and just the energy behind it. That was going to be my next question is, what's the effects,
like positive and negatively? So positively, if the team, if the overall team is full of people that are strong in character, versus when you get off on that, the negative effects that can have on a team. I mean, maybe even from your athletic background, you can.
Well, I'll tell you
think
this.
About some teams.
Yeah, I'll tell you this from either athletically or from a church or a business or whatever. What happens is, if you allow that type of character to continue to linger, you almost have the rest of the team kind of looking at you going, "You talk this game, but you're not living it out," right? So there's this effect that could happen that almost sabotages your leadership to a certain extent, because they're going, "Hey man, like, you have a high, how would I say it, like a high, I don't know the word I'm looking for, of character. But if you're allowing this to continue on, it kind of starts spreading and it could sabotage you. So it gets to be a little tricky, man. Yeah. It really does. And especially when your heart is so for people, but you gotta be pretty clear about what needs to be corrected.
Yeah, that's good. All right, I want to finish out today's episode with a fun question.
Okay.
So
I like fun questions.
Yeah, fun question. Let's just pretend I'm not even in the room.
Okay.
You're sitting across from Todd Doxzon at 18 years old.
Oh, good gravy.
What are you telling him about the importance of character?
Oh, my goodness. I think Cap said it actually earlier, man. It's like I wouldn't say anything because he wouldn't listen anyways. I mean, right. I'd save my breath and my time and my energy. Yeah. I was such a knucklehead, man. I just, it wouldn't have mattered what I said. I think I had just had to go through a lot of hard knocks, Mike, to develop character. I knew what was right. I was raised by amazing parents. I was, taken to church. I understood all that type of stuff, but there was just something in me, man. I was a renegade, rebel, just wanted to, I was all about me. So, I would have said just, God's got great plans for your life, whether you believe it or not, and he's for you. He's not out to get you. And man, if one day you'll humble yourself and really grasp and submit to what he really wants to do, I'm telling you, you're going to see your mind blown with what he'll do in and through you. And the joy that you'll have, man. Earlier, I think on an earlier episode, I talked about peace in the soul.
Yeah.
That's something you can't put a price on.
That's true.
You can be going and doing all this other stuff that's outside of God's best, and it might feel good. I mean, the fact is, sin is pleasurable for a season.
Yeah.
But man, that comes back and snipes you, snipes your soul, and you're just all of a sudden just, you're just misaligned deep in your heart. So I would be probably pretty brief with my comments with Todd at 18 because he'd be like, yeah, whatever, old man, you don't know what you're talking about.
Totally. That's funny. I think this topic, for our listeners, I think this is a really good topic to go introspective. I think it's important. Like, awareness is everything, right? And to your point, it's really easy to go through life deceived by positions of power, money, success, to think that everything's good. But all along the way, we would hate to see people get to that point where they recognize, man, my character really wasn't where it needed to be.
Yeah.
And so our prayer really for this episode is that all of us as leaders would really search our hearts, that we would implement processes where we can go introspective. We talk about getting in God's word daily. That's a huge discipline in our life that continues to shape and mold our character. And I think the second thing is getting around people that are going to be brutally honest with you.
So big.
That are going to be honest with you about blind spots that they may see in your life. I think you put those two things together and you're setting yourself up to continue to move forward. Would you say that? Do you have any closing thoughts maybe as we finish?
I think you hit on a really big one, Mike. I've seen amazingly gifted leaders, and what they have, just those two, they've implemented a daily intake of God's word, and they've put in their schedule as a high priority getting around with other men that aren't perfect, but they're wanting to go the right way. They want to pursue God in his best. And they're able to discuss that along the way in process, to be totally transparent with one another. I've seen those leaders just take on a whole nother level of leadership. And I feel like that is absolutely crucial.
Yeah, so good. So, man, thank you guys so much for tuning in to episode 3 on this 5-part series. We're so encouraged to be in community with you, to get better with you. We would just encourage you to subscribe to the podcast, leave a comment, share it with your friends. We want to continue to grow this community. We want to see more people blessed. We want to see this community and all of us grow as leaders. And so, man, until next time, God bless you.